Hello, my name is Karim and I'm an artist slash designer, and today I'm gonna take you through guidelines I made based on case study on how to make a dialogue collectively to discuss structural racism. My interest in the topic can be manifest by my artistic practice, as my artwork has been always politically involved by using symbols and images that convey the topic of the artwork. For example, Esoteric was an exhibition I made here in Sweden, and the whole idea was based on what we have done so far since the evolution of the human race and how the West looking at the East. I used historical references such as posh artwork, the Garden of Earthly Delight, and colonial images too, to convey how the West portrayed the East. Another artwork using historical references was my unfinished piece Burn Baby Burn, which refers back to the Watts riot that happened in Los Angeles back in like 1965, when a protester was surrounded by fire and was screaming, "Burn, baby, burn! How do you like me now, Mr. Police Officer?" And I built the whole idea of the artwork on the police brutality that had taken place in Egypt in the revolution 2011. The use of symbol and images from historical references has been always embedded, as you can see in my artwork or artistic practice too. Images and sign became the elements that portrays my ideas. As of now, I have finished my master's degree in interaction design. When I found it once again useful to use images to mediate an online discussion on structural racism. Images prove it's important to not only deepen your understanding of the issue, but to shift our attention from an individualized preferences or individualized notion idea of the topic to a collective one. We all have our individual preferences, and when an image is presented, people are tend to describe the same image differently according to their previous experiences. So I used images as a way to discuss the topic, as people decoding and dealing with images all the time in everyday life. For me, structural racism is the hardest and the deepest form of racism. It works without hierarchical system of society, and it also produces notion of racial ideology, and alas, we keep practice this notion without knowing its deep relation to racism, as it is the core problem. Structural racism is a hidden practice and affect not only people of color, but other minorities, oppressed minorities. We can look at structure model as it's a way to analyze how our society works and who it favors. By analyzing, for example, how governmental institutions, for example, like healthcare, policies, justice system, education, labor system, labor justice, also labor rights, all of that, how it works in our society. Racism, the core problem, I call it the big mama, can be expressed by beliefs, and these beliefs can lead to stereotypes, emotions, and also discrimination when it comes to discriminatory behavior and practices that convey unfair treatment. So, according to my design study, these aspects can be applied to the dynamic of racism i.e. an institution, for example, institutional, structural, or even systematic, which means that even if we try to tackle the structure model, our individual factor play a huge role to do so. For example, if we are trying to discuss structural racism in governmental institution, we need as an individual working there to believe that we are racist in a way and produce notion that convey that, maybe intentional, maybe unintentional, but we need to believe that we are racist and we all want it to change. So in my MA project, I wanted to deal with structural racism through design and how design can be used to facilitate a discussion on such sensitive topics. As a result of workshops, an online workshop, it was online, a few guidelines was produced to how to discuss the issue. These guidelines have been made collectively based on participants' reflection on the structural racism, and it's up for constructive criticism and not be taken as an absolute rules. So how can we discuss, ease the tension, and remove the sensitivity of the topic? I will walk you through what I come up with, but before, here is my plan for my workshop. And so basically I have 3 workshops, online workshops. I divided activity inside the workshop, I divided into 3 phases. The first phase was discussion, and I asked participants to bring 3 images that convey structural racism in 3 categories: political, historical, and economical. The second phase was basically me presenting a cases study in the design field that has been dealt with structural racism directly, and that was for educational purposes and to prepare participants for the last phase, which is how to have to work collectively to have a hypothetical project that they would like to see happen on ground to confront structural racism. So referring back to how racism can be expressed by belief, which lead to stereotype, or by emotions, or discriminatory behavior or practices that convey unfair treatment. And this, I applied this on structural racism too, as I find the individual factor pretty important before the collective factor. So now I'm gonna discuss the guideline with you one by one. The first rule is guidelines or rules. Guidelines or rules, basically, if you're gonna be the mediator, you have to be sure and accurate about the information that you provide for the participant. And this information should come from a very reliable source, that you make sure it is correct. And you have to send them, for example, you have to send them like guidelines, a kind of like a very simple guidelines what they have to do, or a very simple guidelines on what they are expecting, and a very simple guideline on a description on the activities. Educational. So you can see the setting, you set it up for participants as a learning experience where everybody can provide understanding of how structural racism function in our society or in society in general, as well as giving them example on that. Because educational aspect can minimize stereotyping, that can minimize discriminator behaviors, and so on. Learning process. Create opportunities for participants to explore their experience as well as learn about structural racism through facilitated dialogue. Through this, participants can find ways to address racist inequality. Flexibility. So change the setting you choose to offer for the participant to have this dialogue. So according to participant needs and according to participant experience. So if, for example, you have a workshop, like a different workshop, so if the workshop in the beginning, some participant lay out some aspects, you have to adjust it and incorporate it into the next one and the next one and the next one. And here you kind of see the development of or the results of your flexibility in front of your eyes. Participant voice. Pay equal attention to everyone. Seemingly, participants are reluctant to engage with sensitive topics if designer or if mediator does not give them the room to lay out their perspective or cut them at some point. So bottom line, give all participants equal amount of time. Community dialogue. So it cannot be assumed that participants have the same knowledge or the similar views about the topic, which here in that case is structural racism. Try to focus on the intra-group discussion and also cross-dialogue discussion too. And by doing that, you bring people together, and by bring people together, more concern is gonna be put it into the discussion, and with that more concern, your knowledge gonna be extended. So it's gonna lead to an extended knowledge. Familiar method. Aim to provide practical skill. For example, I used images to empower people to speak about structural racism, and this is a very crucial strategy when discussing structural racism or the racism dynamics, and to create a unified vocabulary amongst participants. Invoke empathy. Create a circle of trust. You have to create a circle of trust by allowing participants to share their personal information and their personal story that related to the topic. If it's racism, structural racism, or any type of racism. And that in return gonna eliminate the prejudices according to emotions. So you're not gonna exactly feel what participants feel, but at the same time you're gonna have to make them feel that you understand them, addressing them, and incorporate longitudinal strategies. Initially emphasize on similarities among participants or amongst group or amongst how many sessions you do rather than differences, but subsequently emphasize diversity and plurality. Focus on change. Instead of discussing the negatives, develop and support positive notions of change and future solutions. Focus on potential practices that eliminate unfair treatment. Be a participant. It's easy as a mediator, you wanted to make sure everything goes as planned and everyone has an equal time, but it's not the case when discussing such topic. Redistributing power among and responsibility as well as taking on a participatory role leads to better discussion. develop long-term networks. So rather than one-shot interventions, encourage participants to further engage and reflect on the discussed topic for supplementary thoughts on the process. Long-term engagement lead to sustainable change. I use this guideline in design setting, but it can be also used in other environments or settings. Me as an artist, I learned that images are important and sometimes speak louder than words, and therefore can speak both for yourself and for others. Using images when creating discussion is often beneficial, and it is highlighted in the guidelines under the point familiar methods. If I would work further both artistically and design wise, I want to see these guidelines as a toolbox that can you take from when producing art or creating discussion in relation to participants, people, and community for better inclusive future. Thank you.